Good day. Welcome to FocusKSA. This is our continuing webcast series brought to you by Susris.com and the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group. We're pleased to be joined today by Dr. Theodore Karasik from Dubai, a Gulf specialist who's going to be talking with us about Operation Decisive Storm, the military intervention in Yemen by a coalition led by Saudi Arabia and Arab partners. This week, Saudi Arabia began a campaign, a military campaign, airstrikes in Yemen, as has been widely reported in the news. And we're going to dig down deeper with a series of conversations with specialists from the Gulf and elsewhere. Dr. Karasik today is going to be talking with us about the implications of this military intervention. Ted, thanks for joining us. And why don't you lead off with your perspective of what's been happening with Operation Decisive Storm?
I think we have to first understand that Saudi Arabia has been developing the capability to launch such an operation over the past few years. We definitely saw this in the Abdullah Sword exercise from last May in 2014. This was a large-scale land exercise and it showed to the region and to the world that Saudi Arabia was moving forward in terms of planning and engaging in operations outside of its territory. With this in mind, and with the new leadership under King Salman, and with the decline of the situation in Yemen, Saudi Arabia has stood up, put together a coalition of Arab partners in order to take care of the Houthi problem in Yemen. I think this is, obviously, as everybody has said, is a changing moment, if you will, or another way of looking at Saudi Arabia. Instead of having quiet diplomacy or using deep pockets to pay off other people or institutions, Riyadh is now ready and able to use its armed forces as it sees fit. Now, there's a few problems here with how this operation is being advertised. One is the number of aircraft that are being used, and the second is the number of people on the ground. A lot of people that I talk to here in the region are commenting that the airstrikes are all being done not by 100 aircraft, but maybe by just a few aircraft, and being fed by U.S. intelligence in terms of ISR. There's also the fact that the targets that are being hit and on the ground are being targeted in the sense of they are known to be places where the Houthis keep particular weapon systems that are near or can be nearby where collateral damage will occur. In that sense, we have to remember that the Houthis are receiving the same weapon systems that Hezbollah receives in Lebanon. And so the Saudi objective right now, using airstrikes, or at least the ones that we've seen, is to be able to take out intermediate or short-range missile systems that Iran has delivered to the Houthis. That's the main concern from Riyadh. Now, about the personnel numbers. The personnel numbers is very large. It's supposed to be made up of Saudi Arabian National Guard, Saudi intelligence, Saudi border guards, but also there are Pakistanis and Egyptians and also apparently Sudanese on the ground, as well as Moroccans. And so we have to be very careful with the numbers and what this total force is and how they're going to be used on the ground. As the Saudis have said at least twice, there may be ground operations forthcoming. People here think that this might be special operation forces that will go in and try to hit particular targets. And as I mentioned before, the real concern here is that the Saudis want to make sure that the weapon stockpiles that the Houthis have that threaten Saudi Arabia are destroyed. Now, there are three scenarios here for how this is going to go. The first one is just with airstrikes. The second is a combination of airstrikes and special operations. And the third is special airstrikes, special operations, and then rebuilding the networks with particular tribes in Yemen in order to flip them over to the Saudi side. And we've all been aware that after Crown Prince Sultan passed away a few years ago, that the Yemen file had drifted. It's now time under this new leadership, under King Salman, and with the defense minister, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, to go back and to try to work on these networks. And that's where the deep pocket part comes in, because in Yemen, money talks and is able to work much like it can up in the north in Anbar, where Sunni tribes have been co-opted through the use of financial gain. In terms of regional perspective, or in terms of the impact of this ongoing conflict, we have to take in mind that the Houthis are going to be bent on revenge. And so this is why we have seen Saudi Arabia already up security across the country. I think the other GCC states are in the process of doing this, because the Houthis may be able to tap into the discontent amongst certain communities, particularly in the Shiite community, perhaps in Bahrain or in other countries, but also with those who are sympathetic to just what the Saudis are doing. And that means that we are beginning to witness a regional sectarian war that is breaking out, that could occur on a number of different levels, in addition to the potential for terrorist attacks or strikes on infrastructure or pumping stations or on other landmarks. So this is really a moment when the implications for the region are really growing quite rapidly and quickly, the longer that airstrike and Saudi-led operations continue in Yemen. Now, I would also like to point out here that we don't talk much about Oman and what is happening in Oman, because there is a shared border. There is a trans-regional, if you will, network of illicit goods and services that run from Yemen into Oman and vice versa. And I think that we're not focusing much at all, and should, on how Daesh in Yemen, which is growing, and how how ACAP, Al-Qaeda Arabian Peninsula, may take advantage of this situation to stretch to the east. And given the fact that Sultan Qaboos was just returned, some people are arguing that the Sultan's return is very King Hussein-like, in terms of that within days, weeks, that there'll be a transition to a new leadership, that this is a time for Al-Qaeda and Daesh to try to make some type of move into southern Yemen. Of course, this means that Iran might get involved.
Yemen or Oman? A move into southern Yemen, or a move across the border into Oman?
To move further east into Yemen and to enter into southern Oman around Salalah. This is, we've seen increased reporting of guns being captured, or weapons being captured on the Yemeni-Omani border. And we have to remember that Oman is a country that is really divided into separate entities based on geography and topography. This is a concern in Saudi and also in UAE. So I think it's just something that we need to monitor and to be aware of. In terms of the rest of the region, we see that Sudan is included in this. Somalia has allowed overflight rights. We have countries as far away as Morocco who are participating in these developments and in Saudi plans for operations. I think that this is the beginning of what Al-Sisi had called for in the fall, which is an Arab NATO-like association or an Arab operations group, something like this. There's been a lot of talk locally about creating this type of instrument, and the most important part of this instrument is that the U.S. has asked the Gulf Arabs to stand up on their own for many years. And now the U.S. is seeing the Gulf Arabs stand up on their own to do their own fighting. But the dealing with Yemen has a lot of pitfalls and traps.
You mentioned a couple of things I'd like to dig just a little bit into, and we don't have the luxury of too much time today, but you've certainly given us a lot to think about, especially the implications in the region across the Yemen-Omani border, which I haven't seen very many people addressing that piece of this yet. You mentioned ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. There was talk that there was an announcement from the White House that the U.S. was providing coordination and intelligence. Is there any conversation about the what that entails? And you know, we haven't seen a lot of forthcoming press announcements other than a lot of background information. You also talked about the internal threat in Saudi Arabia, and Prince Mohammed bin Nayef convened a meeting of internal security officials the other day. What are the implications for the humanitarian refugee issue vis-a-vis the Saudis accommodating humanitarian refugees, and also what that entails in terms of internal security? And lastly, we're looking at an Arab summit, and you talked about the this Al-Sisi NATO-like organization, and there's been a ministerial meeting in connection with the Arab summit in which there was some discussion of an Arab force. So if you could just maybe provide a little extra on those couple of points.
Certainly. First off, in terms of ISR, it is assumed that this is being fed directly to the operations center at PSAP, where this is being all coordinated from.
That's for those who don't follow our acronyms, Prince Sultan Air Base at Al Kharj, southeast of Riyadh.
Exactly, and this information is being received by the Saudis for their airstrikes, and it is rumored that not necessarily Saudis are flying the fighters in this operation, but is being done by other Arab nationals because of the nature of the airstrikes and the situation on the ground, because we don't want to have any Houthi capability to shoot down any jet aircraft and to capture anybody, of course. The other point here is that there is also information being gathered by the Egyptians and the Americans, particularly around the confluence of the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, because this is a critical choke point, and no one wants the Iranians or anybody affiliated, at least from the Riyadh's point of view, to take control. They do not want to see the Houthis begin to mine the Red Sea, which would really create a major problem in maritime transit along the Red Sea, because this would take months to clean up. So there's a lot going on in the ISR picture besides just what's happening conducting airstrikes. It also involves maritime domain awareness.
Sure.
In terms of the in terms of the humanitarian issue, this has always been a scenario of refugee flows, either coming from Yemen or from Saudi Arabia itself. I think it's very critical that the Saudis and their allies are on top of the potential impact on Asir, Jizan, Najran, and so on. And I'm sure that the Red Crescent and other agencies will be brought in the event that there is any IDP flows or any refugee flows coming in over from Yemen. In terms of the internal security angle, clearly, as you mentioned, Prince Mohammed bin Nayef is firmly making sure that the cities and are firmly under control and deploying extra assets. But I think the big fear is that because of the tribal networks between northern Yemen and southern Saudi Arabia, that these attacks, these airstrikes may light the fuse for disruption or mob violence, if you will, in the southern part of Saudi Arabia. I think that this needs to be kept in mind. At the same time, though, on the internal situation, is we do have Daesh and the Islamic State up to the north, while they're fighting it out over Tikrit and other areas. And how may they be thinking about taking advantage of the northern border area, which has issues, and we've talked before about the northern tribes and their affiliation. So overall, this operation is trying to go after a particular ethnic group, but it's also igniting a lot of other strands of family tribal relationships that cut across Saudi Arabia by region and also across international borders. So the Saudis have to really be up on their game in terms of securing the kingdom. And I'm sure they're working very quickly on this issue.
Great. Before I ask you to wrap up, any final thoughts, let me just remind everyone this is FocusKSA, a webcast program brought to you by Susris.com and the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group. We're talking with Dr. Theodore Karasik, a specialist on the Arabian Peninsula and regional Middle East affairs and many more things. He's joining us by Skype from Dubai. And Ted, any last thoughts on what we should be looking for in the coming days?
I think that we need to really understand that the Saudis have launched this operation with their colleagues at this time because of the pending P5+1 agreement. Riyadh wants to expose Iran's behavior and support for the Houthis on the Saudi border and also taking over the bulk of Yemen. I think we need to watch for this issue of the Saudi airstrikes and the Yemeni response as trying to scuttle the talks or affect the talks. And whatever the outcome of the talks are, whether it's positive or negative, we're already seeing the Saudis state that they are going to pursue their own nuclear weapon capability. And I think we really need to pay attention to the reporting on this, because the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will be requesting these warheads and the systems that go along with it from another member or two of this coalition. So we need to watch for proliferation issues in the wake of this operation.
Are you referring to the statement? Statements have been made that whatever sort of deal the Iranians reach, that the other countries would want similar guidelines in place in regards to developing nuclear power?
I think that what they're going to do is that they see that Tehran, regardless of the agreement, still possesses the knowledge and the capability to do breakout in a particular amount of time. And and since there's an agreement and they don't trust Tehran that they're going to pursue their own nuclear energy capabilities, this is why a lot of people here have been focusing on the visit of the South Korean president to Saudi Arabia and exactly what is in the details for South Korean support for Saudi's nuclear energy program. There is also discussion about really what's behind the Pakistani-Saudi relationship. We've heard a lot of rumors about cooperation between Riyadh and Islamabad on nuclear weapons. And some people think that this agreement is about to be implemented in reality.
Well, thanks for all that, Ted, and I'm sure we'll have many more opportunities to talk about the nuclear issue, and we've, as is the case with nuclear proliferation and the genie being out of the bottle, I think we might have opened the genie in the bottle of our conversation of Operation Decisive Storm by getting into the nuclear arena, but certainly there's a lot of anxiety over that issue, and we'll have to spend more time examining that. We've been talking with Dr. Theodore Karasik, a Gulf specialist from Dubai, on FocusKSA. I'm Patrick Ryan, the editor-in-chief of SUSRIS.com. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Ted, for taking time.
Thank you.
And that's it for this edition. We'll be talking with other specialists on Gulf affairs about the intervention in Yemen and its implications. So check back to SUSRIS.com/FocusKSA for more. And that's it for us. Have a good day.